Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time, Clayton's division launched a mismanaged assault against Ezra Church. Now, Alexander P. Stewart's corps launches their first attacks against all of Otis Howard's defensive line. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from the Teespring store or Etsy shop. Every little bit helps. Thank you. William T. Sherman's troops were taking a beating around Ezra Church, but were able to throw back every attack so far. The tenacity of the Confederates led him to write to his wife after the battle around Ezra Church that, "We have Atlanta close aboard, as the sailors say, but it is a hard nut to handle. These fellows fight like devils and Indians combined, and it calls for all my cunning and strength." The next attacks by the Confederates would come from Alexander P. Stewart's corps. Edward C. Walthall's division led that corps to the battlefield on that July day. Walthall was born a Virginian but raised in Mississippi. Working as a lawyer before the Civil War, when the conflict broke out, Walthall joined the 15th Mississippi, fighting in Kentucky, Mississippi, and Tennessee in some of the bloodiest battles of the Western Theater. Today, he would take a prominent role as the principal attacking force for Stewart's corps. He placed his 3 brigades, with 2 in front and 1 in reserve. Edward O'Neill was on the left, Daniel H. Reynolds was on the right, and William Quarles was in the reserve. The division would advance over the same ground that John C. Brown's division had attacked, but they would be encountering a fresh enemy. While the battle raged around Ezra Church with Henry Clayton's attack, elements of the 16th and 17th Corps began filing into the Union works to replace worn-out 15th Corps troops. The 47th and 54th Ohio's weapons had become so fouled that they couldn't ram their cartridges home, and if they did, the heat from the barrel made the charge go off as they were ramming the cartridge. The soldiers refused to use the precious water in their canteens to clean and cool their barrels, so when they were relieved by other regiments, they went to the rear and urinated down the barrels to clear them out and to cool them off. It was 2 p.m. when Walthall got the order to move in. They set off against the Union works atop the elevated terrain, crossing the same terrain that Brown's division did a few hours before. Walthall's men quickly slammed into the Union line. One Alabama soldier remembered, "The heat was almost intolerable. The firing in our front was very heavy. We were ordered to lie down as the bullets were coming very thick, but as the line was in an open field with nothing to shield us from the burning rays of the sun, we suffered intensely from the heat, especially as we were fatigued by our previous rapid marching." A Federal soldier marveled at the spectacle of the attack. Marching as coolly and deliberately as if they were going out on battalion or grand review, till they were fully halfway up to the fence, when, from our fire, they commenced falling, being killed or wounded. But they never wavered, but closed up and came steadily on toward our works. A comrade remembered, "The slaughter was terrible. They seemed to melt like wax figures in the flame." Walthall remained close to the front, monitoring his battle line and offering encouragement to his embattled soldiers, taking heavy casualties on the slopes. He was a conspicuous figure on top of his dapple-gray horse. An Iowan remembered, "It seemed as if half the army were firing at the general. I took several shots at him myself, as fast as my musket could be loaded for me. It is not strange that I did not hit him, but I have often wondered how he escaped, as I learned, and his horse also did, unhurt, with all those sharpshooters after his scalp." On Walthall's right in the brigade of Reynolds were about 150 Georgia militiamen, led by Major E.H. Youngblood. This was the Georgians' first battle, and they only took 1 or 2 volleys from the Federals before retreating in haste. A gap began to appear between O'Neill and Reynolds' brigades, and Walthall was prepared to fill it. Quarles' brigade advanced into the breach and launched a brave charge against Reuben Williams and James Martin's brigades. The 46th and 55th Consolidated Tennessee regiments lost at least 4 flag bearers as it got to within close-range combat with the enemy. One of the flag bearers was found to have endured 20 bullet wounds before dying. One courageous member of the 26th Illinois jumped over his small barricade to capture the flag and flag bearer of the 46th Tennessee, but the flag bearer sent the sharp ornament affixed to the top of the flagstaff into him, killing the Federal soldier. Another Illinoisan shot the flag bearer in the head and retrieved the flag. A Tennessee lieutenant colonel named Joseph D. Wilson on the smoke-filled hillside didn't realize how close to the Federal line he was, and a Hoosier grabbed him by the collar and threw him into the Union lines, ripping off his gold stars from his collar in the process. The Hoosier kept them as a trophy for his time at Ezra Church. He commented about Wilson that he was the skulkiest prisoner I've ever seen, and for more than half an hour he showered the most vindictive curses upon us, one and all. A member of Quarles' brigade vividly described the bloody attack. Reaching the top of the hill on Reynolds' left, we were ordered to double quick. We charged over the level space, down the descent, and steep hill into the slough. A few in their zeal started up the hill beyond the slough, but were ordered back. All were ordered to lie down. Many of our comrades were left dead and wounded behind us. Reynolds' brigade was not on our right as expected, nor did we again see anything of it during the battle. 2 double lines of the enemy stood behind their breastworks in front. We waited half an hour for reinforcements and orders to advance. In the meanwhile, the enemy were enfilading our position in the slough, and rapidly killing and wounding our men. While in this position, laying on the ground, John Reeves was on my left, and between me and Lieutenant A. Haley. The latter called my attention and asked, "Isn't John killed?" I looked at Reeves. He had not changed his position on the ground or even uttered a groan. Still, he was laying motionless, and made no reply. A moment later I noticed the blood gushing from a wound in his head. He was dead. Quarles and the other 2 brigade commanders suffered horrible casualties, and with no help coming to them, they fell back, retreating a safe distance away from the whizzing Union bullets. One member of Quarles' brigade described the withdrawal. The retreat, as usual, was more disastrous than the advance, because the fire of the enemy was more deliberate and in consequence more accurate, and our men, now having to move uphill instead of down, and being hot and fatigued, required a longer time to recross the same space. The regiment reformed on the same ground where it had been first formed for the battle, and again charged into the slough, being ordered as before to halt and lie down. The enemy was now sweeping the slough with a leaden tempest. Men were being killed and wounded faster than on the charge. After another half hour we were ordered to fall back, and we were again exposed to a fearful fire. Almost completely exhausted by heat and exertion, we could scarcely walk. Many did not attempt it, but resigned to their fate, awaited death or capture. Others, mastering all their strength and courage, began the retrograde movement in a slow walk back across the open space. The ravine and field were thickly strewn with the dead and wounded of the regiment. Walthall's attack failed, but one more division from Stewart's corps was on their way to the front, that under William W. Loring.